There is a moment, somewhere between the thing you have done and the life you had before you did it, where the world goes completely still. Leigh Tiller knows exactly where that moment lives. It lives on the floor of a garage in the middle of the night, with blood spreading slowly across concrete and a wrench lying where it landed, and a phone in her hand with 911 already dialed and her finger hovering over the call button. She does not press it. That one decision, that single second of hesitation, is the thread that everything else will unravel from. Because the hardest part is not what happened inside that garage. The hardest part is every choice she makes after she slides the door shut. It all begins in the dead of night inside a small auto garage somewhere. A woman is crouched in the corner, breathing hard. In front of her, a man lies on his back in a wide pool of blood. A wrench sits near the body, stained with the same blood that is spread across the floor beside him. Her name is Leigh Tiller. She has fresh cuts and bruises on her face. She fidgets for a long moment and then finally steps out to the front of the garage. She takes her phone and dials 911, but before the call can go through, she hangs up. She looks up and sees a car drive by with a little girl staring at her through the window. She slides the garage door shut. She thinks over the next action to carry out. Leigh wraps the body carefully in plastic wrap and begins cleaning the floor of the garage, scrubbing up the blood on her hands and knees. She loads the body into the car and drives out toward the lake. Then she loads the wrapped body into a boat and rows out onto the water in the dark, intending to drop him in and let him disappear forever. She gets as far as dropping the wrench into the lake and watching it sink beneath the surface. But then the dead man's phone goes off inside his coat pocket. She stops rowing and listens. It is a voicemail from his young son, a child's voice asking where his father is, saying he has not come home, asking why he is not picking up. Leigh sits in the middle of that dark lake with a dead man and a child's voice coming out of his coat, and she cannot go through with it. She turns the boat around. She leaves the body in the boot of the car and goes back to the garage where she meets Ray, the man who works alongside her. Later on, she visits the parole officer of her juvenile son, Ryan. The next morning, Leigh takes her teenage son, Ryan, to meet his parole officer. Ryan is on juvenile probation after he blinded another kid in one eye during a fight at school. The parole officer is skeptical and makes clear that he does not believe in Ryan's prospects. Leigh pushes back, insisting her son is a good person, repeating it with a kind of desperation that is about more than just the appointment. She needs someone to confirm that goodness is still possible in their family, because she is not sure anymore. She returns to the garage and goes into the office to look at the footage from that night. She throws the CPU from the garage's security camera into a dumpster without even bothering to erase its footage first. Back at the garage, her one remaining mechanic, Ray, shows up for work. He notices immediately that something is very wrong with Leigh. He watches her and waits. Ray senses something is wrong, but she brushes it off. Instead of sinking the body, Leigh drives it to the property where the dead man's girlfriend lives, a woman named Danny Wilson, who stays in a trailer nearby. Leigh leaves the body there where it will be found. She also puts an anonymous note in the mailbox, something close to an apology, so the family knows someone left him there on purpose. She goes to a bar to drink and gets into a fight and is chased away. Leigh goes to see a dealer and buys pills. The dealer asks how much she wants to forget, and she gives her answer in the dosage she asks for. It is then that she remembers she left her necklace in the place where the body was. She drops her son off with her father, Richard, who is a dirty cop, and the sheriff of the town. She retraces her steps and goes back to the bar, to her house, to her car, but she does not find it. She begins making small mistakes that leave traces behind her. She goes back to Danny's property to retrieve the necklace, but cannot get to it cleanly. Richard, in his way of helping, takes Ryan behind Leigh's back to practice shooting. When Leigh finds out, she is furious. She has been fighting for years to keep Ryan away from what her father is trying to teach him. She confronts her father and tells him exactly what she thinks of him. The relationship between them is barely functional even now, and this pushes it closer to breaking. She is operating on panic and pills, and every decision she makes in this state is a worse one than the last. Danny finds the body. She is grieving and furious and starts asking questions immediately. Danny is a sharp woman, and she begins retracing her boyfriend's final movements. She knows he had been at the garage before he disappeared. She starts moving in Leigh's direction. Leigh mistakenly confesses to Danny that she did it when Danny sees a picture of her necklace in the garage. Leigh is unraveling. She keeps telling people fragments of the truth, not out of any strategy, but because the guilt is too heavy to carry in silence. She essentially incriminates herself to people who are not going to protect her by knowing. She can barely hold a lie together when someone looks her in the face and asks her a direct question. Every interaction feels like another thread being pulled loose. Meanwhile, Ray, the mechanic, has been piecing things together from what he has seen and overheard at the garage. He does not have the full picture, but he has enough. He approaches Leigh and offers help before she has even admitted to him what happened. She tries to keep him out of it, but he has already seen too much. By simply being present and trying to do right by her, he becomes compromised. Leigh confesses to Ray about what she did, and they pack their things and go somewhere else. The flashbacks begin to surface. A young girl, the young Leigh, stands in a hallway outside a closed door. Behind it, there are sounds of a man's voice, a struggle, and then a heavy thud. Silence follows. Then blood begins seeping slowly under the doorframe. The girl watches it without screaming. She has seen this before. Her father, Richard, murdered someone in that room and disposed of the body. The young girl she saw in the car the night of the murder was her younger self. As she stands in the middle of Ray's apartment kitchen that night, Danny's son finds her and attacks her and almost strangles her until Ray steps in and pins the boy to the wall. Ryan comes in and cocks a shotgun. Danny manages to calm him down and takes the gun from him. Later on, they tape up Danny's son, and Leigh asks Ray to leave, as she does not want to incriminate him any further. Leigh goes to her estranged father, Richard, the town's sheriff, not to confess, but because she has nowhere else to turn. Richard is a corrupt cop who has bent and broken laws his entire career. He finds out what Leigh did. Rather than arrest her or report it, he decides to help manage the situation. He begins working to bury the evidence and keep the investigation from reaching his daughter. Danny keeps digging. She goes through her dead boyfriend's things and starts uncovering parts of his past she did not fully know. The more she digs, the more she begins to understand that the man she loved was not entirely who she thought he was. He had connections to criminal activity, to the garage, to things that put him in Leigh's path that night. This complicates her grief. She was ready to go after Leigh out of rage and love, but the picture keeps shifting under her. She and Leigh, it becomes clear, are more alike than different. Both are women who have been shaped by dangerous men and left to deal with the damage. But that shared ground does not dissolve the confrontation that is coming. Richard is doing what he does, working his corrupt leverage to keep the investigation dead. But his version of protecting Leigh is really about keeping control of the situation and keeping her dependent on him. He has always operated this way. He is the kind of man who confuses power with love and expects gratitude for both. Leigh takes the guns and uses them to force Danny toward the garage, where her tied-up son and her father are waiting. They face each other, two women whose lives have been tangled together by a dead man and a dark garage and a choice Leigh made on a lake in the middle of the night. Leigh tells Danny what happened. She tells her it was self-defense. She tells her about the phone call, about the voicemail from Danny's son, about why she brought the body back instead of letting it vanish. But the truth does not dissolve Danny's grief or her fury. Danny has lost her partner and has come to the end of a long chain of loss, and the woman standing in front of her is the one who was holding the wrench at the end of it. Richard speaks. There is a tense and dangerous standoff between Danny and Leigh and her father. Her father wants to kill Danny, but Leigh wants them all to pack their things and leave. Leigh stands in front of Travis, Danny's son. He inserts himself into the confrontation. In the violence that follows, Danny stabs Richard. She drives the blade into him, and he goes down. And then Danny turns on Leigh. She shoots her. As Leigh goes down, she tries to tell her that the blood of Richard is on her shoe. The wrench is on the floor. By the time the last person is left standing, almost nothing is what it looked like at the start. The woman who killed a man and then turned a boat around in the middle of a dark lake because a child's voice asked where his father was, grew up standing in a hallway watching blood crawl under a door while her father worked quietly on the other side of it. She learned everything she knew about survival from the man she spent her whole life trying not to become. The man Danny crossed every line to find justice for turned out to have been living a life with edges she never saw while he was alive. Edges sharp enough to explain how he ended up on that garage floor. The sheriff who buried evidence and called it protection was never protecting anyone but himself, dressed in the language of family the way he always had been. The boy everyone had already written off walked into the most dangerous room of his life, and chose not to pull the trigger. And Leigh, who could not lie to save herself and turned a boat around for a stranger's child, ended up on the floor of the place where everything started, shot by the woman whose grief she caused and whose life, held up against her own, looks more alike than either of them would want to admit. The blood on Danny's shoe belongs to Richard. The wrench is still on the floor, and the only person nobody believed in was the only one who walked away clean. That's it for today's story, but before you go, I gotta ask, if you were in Leigh's shoes, with a wrench in hand and a will to live, what would you do? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more twisted stories like this. See you in the next one.